Hello, and welcome to the Vlogging Pod. Tonight we are joined by J.V. Hillard. Welcome to the room, JV. How are you this evening?
Well, I didn't expect this standing ovation, but I'll take it. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be on. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. I usually love my clapping there.
It was a little bit more than a golf clap, so it was good. I felt like I was, the opening act at a vaudeville show or something. It was good.
I have two soundboards, but I rarely use my second. It's all lit up today, but I rarely use it. I usually just do the smaller one at my side. But I have lots of little noises, but I rarely get the opportunity. So my clapping, I'm telling you, I'm in on that one.
Well, I'm excited. It's the first time I've gotten one, so this is perfect.
Well, awesome. Well, you know what? I'm gonna put this out of order, so try not to give me too much too quick. But you should get a standing ovation more regularly because your book covers are awesome.
Well, I can't take credit for those. And I could take credit for the concepts behind them, but ultimately, I've got a great illustrator. There's a woman named Larch Gallagher who does my work for me out of the UK, and
Mhm.
I was referred to her by my development editor, and she kicks butt. The first cover she did on the Last Keeper, she told me because she asked me, "Are you going to have a trilogy? What are you doing?" And I told her I was doing this quadrilogy, and she said, "Okay, well, we're going to make them different colors. We're going to do this kind of funky thing, and we're going to." And I was like, "Oh, this sounds good." And when she sent them over, I sent them out to my friends and family and those to take a look at them and see what they thought. And I'll tell you, everybody was like, "Oh, this is good. You should definitely use her." So I chose her, and there's no looking back. She's fantastic. So I wish I could take credit for it.
Well, actually, it takes a lot from the author itself to be able to paint the picture, even in the context of your words. So, if you're giving her your manuscript, I don't know how you work that, but even
Right.
in that, she would have to get a really good sense of you as a writer. I like them. I like the depth. I like the overlapping. I like the color detail. I like them. I think they're very interesting. I think they tell a tale themselves.
Yeah, that was the point. There's a couple of rules of thumb in publishing, and one of them is and if you think about it, it makes sense.
Hmm.
And for authors, it's a hard pill to swallow until you realize that the advice is in place because it works. And the first piece of advice is the stuff on the cover doesn't necessarily need to be in the book, right? And
Mm.
the second piece is the cover has to look like your genre. It has to pull people in. So if you were to, go and try to pick up a Stephen King novel and it looks like a romance book, you're like, what's going on, right? It throws you off. So, for this, what Larch did very well was she took typical fantasy adventure and put a little dark spin on them because I write epic and dark fantasy. So it was the combining of the two genres and they pop. And when you walk into a bookstore or you're looking at a little thumbnail on Amazon or wherever you're buying the book, it's got to pop to catch your attention. And if you think about it, the first thing you do when you look at a book that you want to buy is you grab it and you look at the cover, right? And if the cover grabs you, it pulls you in. The next thing you do is you turn it over and you look and you read the 200 word blurb. So my books that are 150,000 words and 500 pages long, people will decide on whether or not they're going to buy it by looking at the cover and reading 200 words on the back. I mean,
Mm.
and then at that point, you might flip it open and read part of chapter one or the prologue or whatever it is. And so you need that capture, and that's what Larch is really good at doing it. So I will continue to pass along your accolades to her because she really does deserve it. It really helps me sell a lot of my books.
Well, that's awesome. I only speak from my own experience. I do my own cover work, but prior to that, when back in my very juvenile days, even outside of my typical juvenile days, but juvenile as a
Uh-oh, are
writer.
we really going there tonight? I just want to make sure you're ready for the can of worms you're opening up.
Well, as as a juvenile, as my writing stages, I guess you want to say,
Okay.
I had a brief experience. I did a magazine supporting authors, and this has been ages ago. This dates me. I'm in my 50s, so there you go. I will give you that.
All righty.
Um, Anyways, I when I originally started, I started doing graphics, and I was very basic, very, very basic. So just with that bit of experience, and then doing my own cover work and how basic my covers were when I first started, you can tell when you see a good cover work. You know what I'm saying? You identify it, and anything that can pull me in and be like, "Oh, wow, I wanna read that." To
Yep.
me, that says, so and your books do that. They have some very interesting cover works, and I like fantasy. That's what I write, that's what I like to read. So, yeah, I would pick these up.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I'm hoping to do more and more of those. So Larch, she's not going anywhere. I've locked her down. She's my illustrator for time immemorial. It's just never going to change, hopefully,
Well,
as long as she's
wonderful.
willing to do them, right?
Now, I have to say, I gotta start well, I'm backing this up because this is not starting where exactly I had planned on it, but that's okay.
Sorry.
No, that's not up to you, that was me on the cover work because I was looking at the page on your website because I have several screens open here in my sound booth, and I was really taken back by your cover, so I had to tell you that right off the bat.
Well, thank you.
Anyways, well, you're welcome. So, back my thinking up just a tad. I take note. I've read that you're a big vampire reader. So, and you had some interesting titles, even as far as Buffy the Vampire.
Yeah, as embarrassing as that is, I'm always looking in the back of my head somewhere. I am one day going to write a vampire novel, and it's strange to say that because typically authors stay in their lane, and fantasy is,
Mm,
if there, it's there's plenty of lanes in fantasy, and I'm already straddled in two of them. But for me, I've always wanted to write a vampire story, and so
mhm.
I write that stuff off to quote unquote research to make sure that I'm seeing everything. So Buffy and I. I've been known to sneak into, certain movies that I shouldn't be, going into that have certain vampires that kind of glow in the sun and, or,
Mm,
that kind
yeah,
of stuff. I'm not
and
gonna, well, I won't name names, but like
right.
if there's a vampire in it, I'm reading it or I'm watching it. It's just I love it. I've done research on them and I love them. And but I think that really harkens back to what I try to do in my novels is the typical epic fantasy that you read. Um, in our cases, we write
Mhm,
often remind people of Tolkien or Game of Thrones or Dungeons and Dragons, where mine has a bit of a gothic spin in it, and even the monsters and the villains that I've created all come from something that scared me as a child or something that I read, and I just love that gothic era feel to it. And Dracula is my favorite novel, and that might
mm,
seem, counterintuitive to those that know me, but I think it was just so well written. And for me, that's what really started at a very young age, the love affair with vampires for me. And so one day maybe there's a cross section where there's a vampire in one of my fantasy novels. I'm trying to stay away from that because I really have a good idea for a contemporary vampire novel, but
mhm,
I can't help myself. I love that stuff, and so I try to embed some of it because that's the kind of thing that scares you. Like for me, an orc or a wolf that doesn't scare me in a Tolkien world. What scares me is vampires and Mary Shelley kind of stuff. Or or you're reading, or Sheridan Lefferts, like that kind of stuff that just grabs you, that Mephistopheles Faustian kind of thing. And sometimes it's mental, as opposed
mhm.
to being all physical sometimes. And I think that is a little bit of a change. And I get quality feedback from my readership, because it is different from what they usually see in other novels.
Right. Well, I can fully embrace vampires. I loved Underworld myself,
Ugh,
so
loved it. Although it
I
helps
know.
when you
Oh
when
my
you have a crush on a certain vampire in the movie that you watch over and over and over
yes.
again. It doesn't matter for me that she's, but hey, look, I don't know. I mean, that's for me that they are, and they're contemporary, right?
Mhm.
They're new, and it's an action you wouldn't see in an old vampire movie, that's for sure. But I interrupted you.
Right. No, no, you're fine. That's what this is all about. I love the interruption. That's fine. I really loved 1 and 2 of the vampires. Now, my husband, he's more of an Anne Rice, and of course, he has done when you talk about as far as theme and rhythm and the content, kind of like how you we're talking about kind of stick with the Tolkien and the Game of Thrones kind of um, writing logistics. I'm gonna put it that way. But he's into all that. Now I've never watched Game of Thrones, to be honest with
Game of Thrones for me was the beginning of the consensus acceptance that the good guys don't always win.
you.
And
Mhm.
that is the seed at the heart of dark fantasy.
Ah,
Is that, you epic fantasy and classical fantasy and high fantasy, you expect the heroes to always win. And in Game of Thrones,
yes.
that only happens 50% of the time. And when they do win, they don't win clean, right? They don't
No.
win because they're just exalted in a C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien kind of way. It's more about the fact that they struggle to win. And you also see the good side of bad people. You also see the
Mm,
bad side of good people. And there's a general, you know, neutrality among that where you start to see through other people's eyes. And I think that really started a snowball effect where you're seeing main characters in movies and in books and video games die at the end, and it makes it a little
yeah.
bit more realistic, maybe a little bit more adultish when it comes down to it. And so that's what Game of Thrones, did for me. But your husband's, sounds to me like an honorable man and a gentleman in the sense that if he likes the Anne Rice stuff. Anne Rice is a little different. I enjoyed it, but the androgyny of the vampire and the general, it didn't make me feel like a classical, Bela Lugosi or Nosferatu kind of vampire. It was less animalistic or less highbrow classical vampire, and it brought it to a different. It was obviously a different feel with Louis and Lestat, and even
Mm,
though I enjoyed it, it's not my favorite, but I know it's widely read and people do enjoy it. So, of course, I'm going to watch it, and or read it, and I
right.
just saw the most recent adaptation of it, and it's a little different, right? Same thing with True
Yeah.
Blood. I think True Blood,
Oh,
stepped over the
yes.
line.
That's another good one.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
HBO. It's like you don't expect, and there was a lot of craziness in there where you do have werewolves and you do have changelings and you do have magic users, and it's based in this like contemporary society, so it's almost like urban fantasy in a sense, that meets this vampire world. And the concept of it is just again, for me, it was a little watered down. It took away from vampirism in its classical sense, but
Mhm.
it's enjoyable and it's a different angle on it. And those are the kind of things you look for is like, okay, well, this is a new adaptation on something that I've seen that I'm familiar with. And so I'm gonna embrace it and see where it goes.
Right. Now, when you talk about True Blood, in the very beginning, when the movie was a lot more similar to the books, I was really into it. And don't get me wrong, it still was a great watch. We watched it all. I have the DVDs. That dates me again, but whatever. Anyways, but I really like the books better. Um, I've even recently, I think a few months ago, I went through the entire series again, and I loved listening on Audibles. So I listened to the whole Suki Stackhouse series again. So there's a lot more. Because I just have been busy, and I just can put earbuds in and do what I need to do for the day, and get my stuff done, and have that right in my earbud. So, but yeah, I feel exactly what you're saying. I have a series that it's not published yet, so I don't wanna say too much,
Uh-oh.
but,
No
yeah,
spoilers here, right?
it has a little bit of vampire, but it's also Indian, and, it's based on the Yaqui Indian tribes, but she's not just vampire, there's more there. But yeah, I took a little twerk on that, but I think that's the thing, when you do something, just like what you said, you have your own ideas. I think that's when you embrace something and you make it your own. That's you know what I mean? It really puts your creative style into it.
It does. I mean, I think fantasy writers in general have to embrace their own world building, right? We can't all write in
Mhm,
Middle Earth because that doesn't belong to us. We can't write in Westeros because that doesn't belong to us. That's a
mm,
Martin thing. So for us, you have to create your own world. And sometimes based on the fact that we are in fantasy, the world has to be based in some form of realism so people can suspend disbelief,
mm,
because you could have a world doesn't have gravity or it doesn't have blue skies or and so you have to explain to people what they're doing when you get in there. And I do the same thing, especially for my I call them cryptids. instead of
Mhm.
using like monster terms or things like that. And and it's the same thing. Like you lifted something from Indian culture. I've done the same. Like I have a skin stealer, which is basically a German doppelganger meeting a Native American ghost, and
Mhm.
they are these changelings, and it's used, in the book as as a mixture of both. So people are kind of familiar with it, but it's a different spin. Or my antlered man is the same thing. It's lifted out of Nordic mythology. And it was a man that was called the master of the hunt. And, he just happened to have these antlers and he controlled wolves and would do stuff. And he wasn't necessarily good or evil. He was just one of these Nordic like demigods. And for
Mhm.
me, I twisted that and made him one of the villains where he
Mm.
hunts the main character on behalf of the the big bad evil guy, and it's this creation of necromancy meets Nordic mythology, and I like that, and people get it, and they're looking at it, and they think that they've seen that, but they haven't seen my spin, and that's what
Mm.
makes it unique, and that's what makes your world building so important for folks like you and I that write in that genre.
Yeah, I like that too. My very first book I ever wrote, and I didn't publish, and not until after I already had several books in a first series, had, Nordic gods and all that stuff into it. So, yeah, I get that. I love doing that. I love doing the research and then twisting the mythology to meet what you need in your story.
Yeah,
So,
and
I
it
mean
makes it unique, right? That's the thing. And so
yes.
people, they look at it and they're like, "Oh, I know, I get this now." And there's assumptions of what might happen, but then in the end, it's yours. You can do whatever you want with it. It doesn't
Mm.
really matter. So, but wait, I don't. You didn't ever publish it, or you didn't publish it until you published other things.
I didn't publish it until I did other things.
Yeah.
I have I am probably about the worst writer you're gonna ever talk to.
Uh-oh.
I in the very beginning, I used to push my work very hard, and I did pretty good. I mean, I sold every month and I made numbers. I'm not a big, pusher of my work. Don't get me wrong, I love the experience, I love writing, I love to really, immerse myself into other people's work. I do write, I do publish it, I just don't bring notice to it. Does that make sense?
Some people write for the sake of the art. Other people write for
Yes.
the sake of the business, right? So, like, I,
Mhm,
I know people that have written. One woman that was in a writing class that I had 4 or 5 years ago. She just wrote her own memoir. Didn't expect to do
mm,
anything beyond that. It was just her, and she had a lovely story about her Catholic faith, and she got pregnant out of wedlock, and back in her
mhm,
day they basically put you away in a convent until you had the baby, and then they would the baby would go up for adoption, and then she would like return home from visiting her aunts at the beach for 3 months or whatever, right? When she started
mhm,
to show, it was just a different culture shift, and for someone like me, I didn't even know that was a thing. So you
mm,
learn stuff about it, and for her, she the only reason she was writing was to basically express this story and talk about it and things like that, and she didn't care if she sold 50 books or 500, right? And then there are other folks out there that this is their job, and so they've got to
yeah.
hustle at it, and it just, I think every author's a little different, and if you don't care about the entrepreneurial aspect of it, and you just care about getting that art out of you and into a book or into
Yes.
a movie or into wherever,
Yeah.
whatever form of art you choose, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very hard to express that to some. There are a few, like when I first started, it's changed drastically. The fields of manything grow and expand. Sometimes we shrink and we go back to other things. It just depends. Um, you know, even society right now, which I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but you you get my gist.
Yep.
There is so much right now that I would rather dive throw myself into fantasy than reality. Yeah, well, anyways, I won't go down that rabbit hole. But when you talk about that, for me, exactly, it is the art. When I got started, and it was people were very. Oh, it had to be done a certain way. Your formatting, grammar, and there's still that. Don't get me wrong. There's still a need for, you know what I mean, to be all into the right editing tools or having an editor and doing all that. But for me, and I never realized it until I published, that I write very differently. And it was that difference that I ended up using as my bio to be like in my very good bio, it's like, "Step away." I'm paraphrasing because it doesn't say this, but it's like it's a big circle with an X in it. "You don't want this book.
Yeah.
You don't want this if you're not into," because it's very artistic. My whole meaning and how I portray stuff, I do a lot of word twisting. I enjoy it. When I write, to me, it's everything, and it's like a book unveiling itself as I write. So for me, this is another reason why I don't push it, because I'm just very different.
Hey, that's okay. I mean, I look, everybody has a different style, and for
Yeah.
for me, it's almost the exact opposite, where
Mm.
I have to plan everything or else
Yes.
I get stuck in the mud. So for
Yeah.
me, and I think that goes back to, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since I was 10. And
Ah,
so
yes,
as
I
part
haven't I go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, I was gonna say,
No.
and part of that, I've been something called the dungeon master. And for those that are listening that have never played, it's the person that controls the game. And so in order to do that, you have to plan and plot
Mm,
out the character's campaign, which will sometimes take years to finish. And as a result of that, you've got to know the details and everything goes into it. And I think I've just been practiced at that for so long that I write the same way. I storytell, and so as a dungeon master, it's a verbal communication of it. But
mm.
when you translate that into the written form, um, I need that outline, and I am so jealous of people like you that could just sit down and write, and the story takes on a life of its own. For me, it's like
Mm,
I'd have to know what it is, and then I can write it. But if you tell me, like I have a friend, she's so good at it too. Like these 3-word challenges, and you've
mm,
got 24 hours, and give me you only have 100 words, and they have to have, and in your 100 words it contains these 3 words. I would freeze. Like literally, I'd be like,
mm.
I don't know where it goes, or I would go back to the same story. But if you said I need a story that goes A, B to C, and I know how to get from A to C, then I'm good. I can sit down and write. I never have writer's block. But you fly by the seat of your pants, crew. I'm jealous. I am so jealous because I wish I could do it and I just can't.
I find that fun. That would be extremely fun, the 3 words. I ghostwrited for somebody else, and he loved my stuff, but I took his writing and I just rewrote it.
Yeah,
I took his stuff and rewrote it. That's all I did, and he loved it. I just added I I didn't add away from the content, I just flourished the words so that his story was more, you know what I mean, perceived in the mind, where you could actually see it happen. It was very block formed kinda writing, if that makes sense. It was very to the point and exact. There wasn't any, extra emotion, you know what I mean? This was actually his life story. So, when I say flourish, I don't wanna say I put lies in there. That's not what I mean.
not at all.
But yeah.
Yeah, I get exactly where you're going with that because some people, especially, I teach a class at a local community college, and it's like how to
Mhm,
write your first novel and then how to write your first sci-fi fantasy novel. And there's a lot of folks in those classes that suffer from that same thing. They're not professional writers, they're not
mm,
professional storytellers, but they either have a life story they want to tell or they've got this great idea for a story, but they don't know kind of the rules of the road. And like you said earlier, there's no real rules of the road, but it's kind of like, all right, if I arrive at that stop sign before you, I get to go, even though no one really officially has the right of way. Like once you learn how to do those things, and people, they're those little tricks of the trade, like writing in media res, or writing so that you're showing as opposed to telling, and things like that. It helps people, but that's why they use folks like you to help
mm,
them, because they're either incapable of it or it'll take them a while to learn how to do it. And I my first novel was the same way. I mean, I wrote every day of my professional career, but it was all nonfiction, right? It
mm,
was it was horribly boring. And so I had to learn pacing. I had to learn dialogue. And I think I became good at it quickly. But if it wasn't for a very honest development editor saying, no, you're talking and this is coming out of, you're head hopping here, and or
mhm,
you've got to pace this is instant love and you can't have that, and you make it a simmer, this is a slow burn, and you're like, oh, I get it now. And that's where I think professionals like you come in to really help people. And they can learn from those things. If I'm able to do it, they should be able to do it too. And but like you said, I mean, all you were doing was really kind of spinning it up and fluffing up and dusting it off and making it a better story. Even though they had a good story, they're just not professional writers, and they just need a little help here and there.
Right. Well, you saying professional is very nice of you. I just look at myself as an artist. I bow down to anyone who has it as a profession. In all honesty, now I can say that yes, I've written about 15 books. So yeah, my style has improved since I began. If you picked up the first book I ever wrote and look at what I can write now, you would say, "Oh, there's some growth here."
Yeah, well, that's good.
But
That's the whole point. You're supposed to be a
right,
better writer when you get done with book one, right?
right.
Like book two
Well,
is going to be easier, right? Yeah.
right. Well, when we talk about your books, let's me back this up when we put this train back on track here.
Sorry.
No, no, you're fine. I just want to make sure I shine a light on your work. When we have you had your first book, and you mentioned here because I did write it in my notes when you talked about Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm glad that you brought it up again. You have what did you say? You have 20 years experience of playing the game, I believe, is what I read.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been playing since I was
Okay,
10. Yeah, my
and
uncle
you
got me for Christmas a box set, and I just fell in love with the game.
And you use this experience in the first of the series. I think it's Warminster series, which is this last book that came from?
Yeah, so I've used it in all of my writing. And
Mhm,
in part it's because the tales you weave in the game are basically group delusions, right? Like when you're sitting around, you're not playing a tabletop game where you're rolling dice and moving a piece around the board. This is a story that I'm telling you as a dungeon master, and then you as a player are telling me what you're doing as a result. So you might be in a dungeon or crawling through a cave and you're tracking the evil bad guy, and sometimes that's a dragon and sometimes that's a undead creature or whatever it might be. And it's a story that you're playing together, and then when you leave, those stories don't leave your head, and they're all battle tested, right? So like I know what stories are better because my players reacted better to them, and we talk about them when we get together, and we relive them because they were part of our group delusion. And for us, there's some dice rolling and stuff like that, but it's all about the role playing, right? So you
mhm,
get these great characters that have years to develop. You watch them develop in front of you, and then sometimes you can adopt them and move them into your stories. And a lot of famous authors have done that and have been paid to be able to do that through, you know, what was at one time TSR is now Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro that own the Dungeons and Dragons stuff. So if you look at Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman and Phil Athens and R.A. Salvatore, all of those folks played Dungeons and Dragons and then wrote books about their Dungeons and Dragons experience. I am not paid by Dungeons and Dragons to write my stuff, so it's an entirely different world with similar things that they're recognizable to those that have played. And when you read the books, it takes you through. You'll feel the battle scenes. You'll feel the way that you would almost be playing it. And there's even the way that they the people are writing these days. Oftentimes they're just writing the experiences that they've had as a player or as a dungeon master. And so it's not word for word and it's not character for character, but it's basically taking the best of your gaming experiences and then baking them into a final product that makes for a really good story. It just so happens that if you're a D&D player or anybody that's played a role-playing game, it's very lucid to you. You follow and you fall right into it. You're like, oh, I can see where this is going. As in whether you're a dungeon master or a player character, you could appreciate it from either side of the table. And I think that's what's exciting for me. Now, not everything it's that's in my books I played, but some of the main characters we did, and it's fun to see them come to life in this new story. And it's also kind of fun to they're like little Easter eggs that are left from my friends and family that I've played with over the years that look back and they see their character's name and they get excited for it, even though the story might veer completely in a different direction than what actually happened in gameplay. And I think
mhm,
that's what makes it fun.
right. Now, I have never played, but I have watched Stranger Things,
Okay.
and on Netflix. Have you ever watched?
Of course, I'm a D&D nerd. Of course, I'm gonna watch Stranger Things.
And that and my I believe my husband, has had some experience with it. I have never played, but I see it a lot. I was on, TikTok, and I saw someone who made a board, and it was phenomenal. There was fog that came up from the board that they made, and all these people sat around the board to play the Dungeon& and Dragons. You ever looked at stuff like that?
Oh, I love it. I'm in fact this weekend I'm at Steel City Con, which is a form of a Comic Con, and there'll be vendors there selling all sorts of things like that. And or
Mm,
you could do pre-mades, you could order things custom to what you want to do. And people, there are even packages online that you can buy that allow you to create your own maps and your own stuff so that when you're playing, because a lot of people when the game first came out, you had to play in the same room with someone. Hence the
mm,
name tabletop role playing game
mhm,
RPG. Nowadays, you could play on Zoom or Skype or Google Meets, and you could play from anywhere in the world at the same time. And so now you've got the technology that could create maps and people can see, or you could create your characters and they can see what they look like just based on the stuff that you're using, and it brings it really to life. And when you're telling a story, especially if you're all together,
mhm.
there's a buzz in the room as a dungeon master, and you can look, and I'm telling you, it doesn't happen all the time, but there are times in the game where you're describing something and you're looking in the eyes of the five or six other people around that table, and you're all seeing the same thing, and it only happens every now and then. But when you do that as a DM, you love it. You remember that. You're like, oh, these I've got it. And sometimes it's because they're scared, right? Like you're scaring them. They don't want their characters to die, even though it's a piece of paper and they're rolling dice and it's just a game.
Mhm.
You invest so much of your time and effort into this character and its growth. You want to die. And then if you put a scary scenario around them, whether it's a fire breathing dragon or a vampire or whatever, you name it, as long as it's something that they can feel, you can see it and it's tangible. And I think that's, when you get a board like that that emotes, like
Mhm.
you could get the like the theater fog around it, or lights, or I've been in groups where they have background noises, and they'll
Oh,
do,
yeah.
yeah, or they'll play music when there's battle scenes and stuff like that. And
Yes.
that gets people jazzed up too, and it makes it more experiential and something that is more memorable, and therefore people have a lot of fun doing that. So I think all those tools are great. I would never say not use them, or yes, you have to use them. But
Mhm.
if you get the right group of folks, D&D is a game that can be um, a lot of fun and memorable. And I'll tell you what, I get in trouble for this all the time by my wife when we'll go to like Christmas is coming up. So we'll go to a bunch of Christmas parties, and my nerd
Mhm.
friends will all be sitting around talking about something that never happened, and all of our wives are looking at us like, what are you guys talking about? This didn't happen. Why aren't you playing poker? The football game's on, and we're sitting there talking about, some idiot friend of ours did something stupid in the game and it cost him his life or her life. And you're just like, and we're laughing and having a good time, and they feel on the outside all the time, but it's in your head, it happened. So your brain doesn't know the difference between it not really happening and it actually happening. So it makes it a lot of fun.
I'm not a big gamer, but, I like to sit back and watch, you know what I mean? Even I bought my husband, the Harry Potter game only so I could sit back and watch him play it because, the journey through those. I even watch them on YouTube where people walk through. I'm not a big gamer, but I love to watch it, which is why I really enjoyed, I know you say you don't need it as far as the storylines, but the storyboards for the D&Ds, I was fascinated, like, even what you said, the music and the sounds and the visual. I would get lost in that. I would be so immersed in what's going on. There's no way I could play because 'cause I'd be like, "Whoa, whoa, what happens next?" I would
Well,
be there's no way I would concentrate. I'd wanna watch the story, you know what I mean, come alive around me. I'm really bad about that. I just even going to Universal Studios because, well, as you can tell, I'm a big Harry Potter buff, but, I love just walking around and looking at it and looking into the windows of all the storefronts they made. I really am the visual person. I could just stay for hours just to look at stuff. I know I'm a real nerd on that point, but I get you when you talk about all that. I would rather be around someone like you guys listening to just you talk about the game. I would find that fascinating.
well, first of all, I would encourage you to, if you haven't seen Critical Role or
Mhm.
other game groups that are doing it online, watch them and you'll pick it up and you'll get it. And you'll see after watching it for an hour or two, you'll be like, oh, I see what they're doing here. And it's a role playing game, so you're not playing yourself, you're playing some character that you've created, and you can have a different voice, you can be a different sex, you can do, you can
Yeah.
have a character that's just the opposite of you, but it's a way for you to act out and have a fun time doing it. And then the right kind of group, there's a good chemistry with it. And
Mhm.
those groups out there is, I mean, I would absolutely recommend them. Second of all, Slytherin on this side, if you put the sorting hat on, I don't know if you're the same or not, or if you're Gryffindor. I don't know where you are, where you fall down, but this, you're talking to a Slytherin guy over here. So
Mm,
just is what it is. And I hope I haven't
yeah.
offended you. But yeah,
No, oh heavens, no, no. I love the whole realm of it. I just love it. I loved the professor oh gosh, now I can't even think
Snape.
of the name. Yeah, Snape. There you go. I love the Professor Snape. In fact, my husband was just showing me the character they have approved for the series they're gonna do. And I was like, "Oh, I'm so intrigued. I just cannot wait until that stuff comes out." But yeah, I'm into that. I love just the visual of it. So now, when we talk visuals, I want to steer us back just a bit. I want to talk a little bit about the Warminster series. Now, your latest is Echoes of Ghostwood. Am I correct?
That's right. That's the fourth and final installment of the Warminster saga, and it's the big bad ending, right? It's I would I had a lot of fun writing it. It's
Hmm.
not as long as the other novels. It's only about 400 pages. But it is one big battle from beginning to end. I think there's only two chapters where there isn't some sort of battle going on, whether it's a sweeping battle on a battlefield with the armies, or if it's a duel between two arch rivals that you were waiting for all this time. There's magical duels. There's the new kind of like fun, creatures that I've created as part of it, and or adapted for part of it. And Echoes, it wraps it all up. It's if you look at the series, the Last Keeper begins in Ghostwood and
Mm,
ends in Ghostwood, and it's so like you get that finality to it where you've come back home for the final installment, and all the characters get a chance to meet there, and some live, some don't. And I've gotten it was a lot of fun to write, but I will say this: it was exhausting because
mm,
as an author, sometimes when you write battle scenes, you run out of your own steam. And my editor, I love that Phil Athens, who's a great guy. Phil is, he used to work at Wizards of the Coast, and is he does a lot of fantasy adventure novels. He does a lot of editing now, but he himself is a New York Times bestseller. And Phil's like, you ran out of steam here, or you need more
mm,
energy here. I want to see more of this scene. And you go back and you're like, oh, but I just wrote that. And you have to go back and then when you see it, you're like, you know what? He's right. I gotta go back and fix
yeah.
this. And once you're done, you're happy and you're like, man, oh man, does this feel good? He gave you that advice, because in the moment you're so sometimes you become nose blind to it. You're so close to it as an author, you don't see it, and
Oh,
someone who's
yeah.
reading it, they're like, "Oh, well, yeah, that's what happens here," and you're like, "Oh, I forgot to write that because it happened in my head, but
Mhm.
it never ended up on the page." Uh,
Oh, I'm horrible at that. I'm horrible at
yeah,
that. Yes.
we all are. I don't care who
Mm,
you are. Just happens, and that's what
mhm,
editing and beta reading's for. And so for me, Echoes really was the epic culmination of a harrowing adventure that spans a half a million words, and 2,000 pages plus of this epic series, and then leaves room for the next trilogy that'll launch in 2026. So I'm already excited about writing that. And this coming year, I've got three standalone novels coming out. The first two are, one is about the origin story of one of the villains, the other is the
mhm,
origin story of one of the heroes, and the third book, talking about vampires, I used sort of what Bram Stoker did. He wrote Dracula in a diary form, several diaries, in fact, as opposed to you're reading someone's notes on what's going on, and you're following the story through their diary. In this case, Princess Elspeth, who is one of the main characters in the book, Adeline, is writing in her diary over the course of years, and it bridges
mhm.
series one to series two, and you get to see her from the day series one ends, and then the last diary entry is going to be the day that the new series begins. and I just love the way that's going to tie the two together. And and then in 2026 we're going to launch the next trilogy. And because I didn't leave any stone unturned. Everybody got
Mhm.
the answers they wanted, but a lot of people are going to be upset at some of the answers and how things ended, because they don't always end clean. Again, it's dark fantasy, and the good guys don't always win. But I've gotten some really positive feedback about where it left off, and things kind of closing up on their own, and bringing all of these divergent storylines together to then set up. Even though everything is kind of closed off, we know what's going to happen when the next series begins, and so there's a little bit of a waiting game there. But that's just because it takes a while to write a trilogy. Where these one-offs, they don't have to be as long. They don't have to be like epic fantasy size. They can be
Right.
a lot smaller than that.
Well, you're talking to a novella lover, so
There you
at least
go.
that's what I write. Now, don't get me wrong. When I listen to other people's book, I expect higher standards. I want longer books. But when I write, I am horrible. Oh, actually, my husband is in the room, and just to back this up a little bit so that I
Uh-oh.
got swept into what you were talking about. Laura said that she's Ravenclaw, so there's that. Laura's
Okay, there you
my
go.
my beautiful assistant. Well, actually, my partner in crime, more like. But anyways, and my husband asked. He says, "When will Echoes of Ghostwood come out in audio?" He's a big audio fan as well.
So it's in production right now, and typically what my publisher has set up is that we launched Echoes in September, so right here for probably 5, 6 months out. So we're looking at probably February, because it's about halfway done. And um my voice actor is a guy named Victor Bevine, who is just
Hmm.
fantastic. He's done a lot of sci-fi and fantasy books, and he's well known in the community. And he's easy to listen to, and people will buy my book just to listen to his voice. He's just really good
Oh,
at it. And so we typically we stagger them so that the
uh,
audio launches like 3 or 4 months after the book does. In this case, it'll launch 6 months after, which is fine. So we're coming up close. But I'll tell him, I'll tip him off. I'll let him know, and I'll send him a free copy.
oh, he's listening. He's right in the room on the chat section.
Oh, sorry, sorry, sorry.
No, no, you're fine. Just so you know there, Jeff, he has 3 other books and they're all on Audible, and you can get on our Audible account and go look at those.
Yeah, check them out, Jeff. Download them,
Yeah,
Jeff.
yeah,
Leave
Jeff.
leave leave a 5-star review, Jeff. Even if you hate him, Jeff.
Um, yeah, Jeff. Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's hilarious. So now, just before I know we're over just a little bit on our time, but that's
Sure, of
fine. I wanted to ask you just a few more questions, if you don't mind.
course not.
Um, well, awesome. So I already know just from you telling us that you do Dungeons and Dragons, and when you do that, there is a lot of planning. And so, if I asked if you were a plotter or a pantser, I'm sure that I'm going to get a planner from you.
Oh
And
yeah,
I also know that I also have because I have a little bit of insight on that because the research I found is that you have where did I read it? Here, I put it on my notes here somewhere. An 8 by 4 wall of notes. Tell me about the wall of notes.
it's horrible, right? So it's basically me spilling my ideas onto it. It looks like a bracketology for a March Madness tournament, right? Like it
Mm,
literally has character arcs, and it has plot arcs, and they all come together, and then it's a whiteboard, and I will erase it as stuff gets embedded into the novels, and that way I don't leave anything out. And for me, it's a way for me to visually see the book coming together, and then I redo it for the next book and the next book. But I've got this master one that has all the books that come together, so I know when all these points of inflection happen. And
mhm,
so they're paced out well, and the characters that meet, and you don't forget about certain details that you need to bake into it. And so for me, that's my way of planning it. It's ugly and it's horrible, and it'll give you a headache, but that's the way I think. And so for me, I need that visual. And some people take notes, and other people dictate, and other people don't. They don't do any of it. They
mhm.
just sit down, like you said, they write by the seat of their pants. Not me, And I
Well,
I have a weird, like, I write the end of my book first,
mm,
then I write the beginning of my book, and then I fill in the middle.
mm,
And I've always done that, and it's weird, it's wonky. And if you asked my assistant Bree, she hates it because I will write. 7 chapters about a character, and that character,
Mhm,
so it's like mini books, and then I start to layer them together in the book with the right intersections, and sometimes it causes a little bit of a hiccup for her, but
mhm.
she's like, "I don't know how you write that way," and I say, "I don't know how I could write any other way." Like, without knowing, like, I got from beginning to end, and now we're there, like, and that's just my writing style, and it's goofy, and I'm sure that some people do some of that. Some people are laughing right now thinking about the how crazy that sounds. But for me, like, I need that visual so that I know the direction I'm writing.
I have no judgment on any of that.
Well, thank you.
I don't, because I only say that because in the very beginning, I had boards. I had, the just putting a piece of big cardboard up, and I would put all the Post-it notes up. And then I went from that to doing Post-it notes on my computer, like one of the visual screens. I also when I do write by the seat of my pants, I won't lie, I do that. But I also, as I create my characters, I have a guideline for all my characters. So every time that I write about that character, I'll highlight the passage, copy paste, put it in my document. This is why I always usually typically have well, currently I have one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screens in my sound booth. Although I don't write in here, but I typically have about 3 screens at my desk at all times because I'll have different documents up in each one. And just what I found valuable about what you said when you were talking about your books, I'm assuming you go from one story in the series and it goes right in seamlessly. Quote me if I'm wrong here, as if you never put the book down into the next book.
That's 100% correct. Like, you
I see, now
leave.
I love that because that is what I tried to do, especially with my DHC series, and, I actually took a spinoff, and I actually took it from where I ended that book right into the spinoff, and I published that this last year, but I love that. I love where you feel like you did not put the book down, you just went in from one thing right next. And with me, I'm very basic. I put the document right up next to each other so I know where my characters left off, and then I start writing on another screen, but I have it right, you know what I'm saying? Right where I can read it as I'm going along. But I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, that's for me, I think it's there's that continuity that needs
Mhm,
to take place, especially when you leave it. And I don't mind, like, my first book kind of leaves you at a little bit of a cliffhanger, and
mhm.
then you pick it up in the next book, the very first chapter puts you right back in that scene. So you're like, and people are like, "Oh, I gotta wait for this next book," but then they go and buy it, you know what I mean? Because they want to find out what
Yeah.
happens. And I don't know, they don't have to wait. It's like, "Pam, I'm gonna punch them in the face with it in chapter one." And that's what it is, and so that's I've enjoyed that. And look, there are times where it makes sense, where there's like a 3-month break or a 2-week break or a 2-day break, and you're picking up where you left, but it's basically the same thing. Like, you're leaving that scene and coming right back to it, and
Mhm,
pulling them back, I think, is really kind of important for that continuity.
mhm. Oh, yeah. I had years between this last book and the prior series. I mean, like, years, like 10.
Wow.
So, yeah. I've had things happen. We won't go down that rabbit hole either.
All right.
But yeah, so I understand all that. I get it. So now let's talk genres. Your fantasy literature, but you are epic dark fantasy. Can you tell me what draw? I mean, I know the Dungeons and Dragons, but how did you finalize that for yourself?
Well, part of it is what you mentioned a few minutes ago, is I'm a big planner. And
Mhm,
when you think about creating your own world, there are folks that can write a story and you're in that world for a second and then you're gone, right? I
mhm,
think good fantasy, you have to build a world around that. And in order to do that, you spend a lot of time building things that are specific to your world. So I have things like religions that are specific to my world, a pantheon of
mm,
gods that's specific to my world, a currency that is specific to my world, languages that are specific to the magic systems and all that. And so when you start to build all those things together, you look at other authors and how they've done it successfully, whether it's Brandon Sanderson or Terry Pratchett or J.R.R. Tolkien, or your Lord of the Rings with or not Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones with George Martin, and they've all done it. They've created these massive, massive systems, and so for me, the only way I can see it is in the same eyes that they've seen it, and it creates this epic world that's all encompassing. There's a history to it. There's a future to it. You can see progress in it, and you can see inflection points and things that have happened in the past, right? And they're
Mhm,
all are big portions of that. And so for me, it was important for me if I was going to do it to build something that people can live in and return to that wasn't just a one-off novel. And I think
mhm,
that helped me decide to do the epic stuff. The dark stuff I know we've talked about before, which is more like being a little bit more adultish. Even though my books are designed for what I would describe as advanced young adults that don't mind seeing death or sexual situations, even though it's all closed door and mine's a
mhm.
real clean PG-13. There's no swearing or anything you're going to be
Right,
as a parent you might be upset about. I wanted to keep it Star Warsy or Indiana Jonesy, but there's death in those movies too, right? And so, but it's something that a 13-year-old like when I started playing the game or I started writing, I would get that. I'd understand what that is. I've experienced that in my life. And so I wanted to have that broad stuff, but I wanted to have this world that we could return to. And that's the whole goal, is to keep coming back to the realm of Warminster. And I can put other novels and other future series in it, and the world will still be there. There's enough meat on the bone there that I don't have to create just another world or a one-off here or there. I can live within that realm. So I've created my own map. I've created my own
mhm,
history, all these other kind of things that are a lot of fun. And I think people that like epic fantasy gravitate to systems like that because they've seen it and they get it and they're like, oh, and they want to be immersed in that too. And so for someone like me that enjoys complicated things, this is why I chose that and why I like it. I just put that little gothic spin on it and make it a little different than what you might pick off the shelf and read.
right. Just from our brief conversation here, and I don't have any more knowledge than what we've talked about here, but just from that alone, just I get the sense from you that when you're world building that it's endless and there's probably a lot more that you have not put in your books.
That's right. You know,
Yeah.
but the plan is you release those tidbits,
Mhm.
2 or 3 new tidbits in each new novel. So, like in book one, you don't want to overwhelm them with a history of it. You want to give them just enough that they can see that there's a history and they're intrigued and want to learn more. And when you get to book
Mhm.
two, oh, I now see how this works and why this is important and how it fits in the world. Or these gods that you mentioned in book one, I only mentioned 3 or 4 gods because other than that, I mean, holy cow, what are we doing, right? But
Right.
by the time I get through book four, you now know the pantheon, this the system that the world lives in, and and what it means, because these gods often interact,
Mhm.
very similar to like Roman or Greek mythology, where they're a big part of your
Mm.
everyday life as opposed to like distances away and really amorphous, where this is more faith-based. This is more like, hey, the gods are here, they're not here, they're not terrestrial with us, but are they're evidently available. Like you can go and pray and have something good happen or bad happen. There are
Mhm.
curses and things like that are a part of that too. So there's, they play a big part in what happens in the novel. And I think, religion writ large has been taken out of that genre a ton, over the last 20-25 years. And I just put it back in because I think that's the cool part about it. There's this divine
Mhm.
magic, there's this, learned magic that comes with it. There's this sorcerer's magic that you're kind of born with, and there's just magic. And it makes the world interesting, and it's a little bit in there for everybody.
Right. Now, I have to say, Jeff has made a comment in the room. Again, Jeff. He's gonna test my grammatical speaking here or my pronunciation challenges. Let's see. He says he name dropped a couple great authors that seem to drop D&D right into a book you have, and he wants to know if you have tried Eric, and I'm gonna mess up the pronunciation on this, so thanks a lot, Jeff. Ungland, Ugland.
I have not. If that's a newish author, I'm unfamiliar with them, and I would love to read it if it's in and around my space. I I read that stuff all the time, and I'll have to go check it out.
I have no idea. He has, let's just say our living room is basically a library. We have bookshelves galore. He loves books. on the Audible. I'm actually looking it up as we speak. Let's see what we got here.
Well, while you're looking it up, I will say that Jeff has now been confirmed as a good man and a scholar. And I don't know if this, I don't know where you are, but I'm in Pennsylvania. And
Ah,
if
we're
Jeff,
Ohio.
all right, and if Jeff is if he is interested in this little tidbit, if you have over 1,000 books in your book collection, you can officially be a library. And so one
Mm.
of my, and my wife hates it too, because that's the entire, I have books falling out of every nook and cranny here. But ultimately that's a good goal to have, in my opinion. It's a bucket list thing for me to have enough books that I've read. And I have
Mhm.
a little bit of obsessive compulsive, well, a lot more than a little, but the idea is I don't, if I have a book in my house, I have read it. Right. And it's just I've got some rules of the road with keeping a book. So if I buy a book, I'll buy a paperback and destroy it, read it a couple of times, and then I'll go out and buy the hardback and never read it and stick it on the shelf. It's like a virgin book, it's never been touched. And I just stick it there, and it's just there for me to remember that I read it. And I don't know, that's a weird thing, but my eventual library of 1,000 books is going to be, I don't know, maybe in my, last will and testament, someone will get it and put it in a real library. But I like the fact that it could be considered a library, and I'm working on it. So it's a goal, life goal, Jeff, life goal.
Life goals, yes. Well, we haven't. I don't know if we have 1,000, but I know I have had to move my cheesy romance because I love everything. I love fiction, fantasy. I love. Well, I read more romance in my teens, so I have a massive amount of that. As I was growing up, I read the cheesy romance books, all the Harlequins and all that stuff. But now I'm more about I love action books, fighting, the whole fantasy. I love dragons. I love oh, for heaven's sakes, vampires,
Hmm.
werewolves, you name it. I love that. And I love books with action. It doesn't actually have to have the intimacy, although I do have that interlapped into my books, but I actually love it when there's so much action and you know what I mean? Just the turmoil and the action and this right when you open the pages and you're diving into it. I love that kind of stuff.
Well,
So
then
from
you're
what
going to
I
love the Warminster series. You better pick it up, read it.
well,
Jeff, make sure she reads it.
I've got it on here and I've already got it up on my Audible, so we're gonna put that in. And
Oh, there you
Jeff and I
go.
like to listen, either do the series at night for some other movies, or we'll listen to an Audible book. We'll have Alexa read it off and light up the whole room with it. So I did look up Eric's books here, and we're looking at, let's see, trying to find the basic one here that's kind of all listing. Bad to the Throne, and One More Last Time, The Grim Guys. He has a massive amount of books here.
I'll
Massive.
have to check it out. I will definitely have to
Yeah,
check it out.
there's
But it
quite a
sounds
few.
like my kind of, yeah, my kind of book.
Yeah, as far as you're judging it on the characters, I have no knowledge because I have not read them. So, very interesting covers. Very similar to yours. Yeah, you'll have to look them up. Pretty good. I'm
I
getting
will.
tongue tied here because I'm looking at something I shouldn't be and not
That's all right.
concentrating on what I'm doing. So I want to
I'll take a swing at it. Don't worry.
Awesome. I want to thank you so much. You were very interesting to listen to. Um, I think our styles differ quite a bit, but you are more, I would say, rounded and developed than me. I'm more of just, I do this for fun.
Hmm.
That kind of person on the side. So, but I love listening to the differences in our our genres and our depths of what we do. And I find you very interesting. I love the book covers. They're awesome. And to be honest with you, I am going to read this.
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, it's an honor that you would, I look at it when people ask me why I write, and it's really to entertain other people, right? When I started doing it,
It
it was a
is.
side hustle,
Yeah.
and it was something I've always wanted to do and kick it off the bucket list kind of thing. And now I get more energy from getting feedback like that, and it just
Hmm.
encourages me to write more. And so I enjoy it. And I want to see some of these characters come to life and things like that. So I hope you do
I
enjoy it.
I'm
I
sure I
appreciate
will.
that, and of course I appreciate the opportunity to come on the show tonight. I really do.
Jeff thinks that you could get away with reading your own audibles. He thinks you have a good voice.
Well, thank you. I was afraid of my own voice, and I've always lived under the I'm an entrepreneur. And what I've learned early and often as being an entrepreneur is if you don't know how to do it, pay a professional to do it. And and Victor was worth every penny. I mean, the guy is not inexpensive,
Mhm.
but the fact that, it's professionally done with a voice people will enjoy hearing, and I appreciate the kind sentiment that I have a voice that might work for that, but ultimately, I was scared. I didn't want to drop the ball and it be in my,
Oh, but it's
crazy
it's it's
voice.
that fear that makes it fun. I've
Uh,
actually I've actually done 2 of my own audibles, and I'm not happy with them. I wanna redo them. That's why I have this studio. I started doing the podcast because, pronunciation is my vice. And when I
ah,
get ready to read anything, I go through the chapter and make sure that my you know what I'm saying? I try to, uh, prevent any of my pronunciation errors, but I have control of the whole Audible situation over here in my sound booth, so I can stop, pause, go back in, edit, do all that clipping. But I think it's the challenge of not knowing how to do something that entices me. That's why I don't look at myself as you put it, professional writer. I love the challenge of it. I love to meet a goal of something. I love to create a story. And if I'm lucky enough to have a reader who enjoys it as much as I did creating it, then oh my God, I'm a success right there. Even if it's just 5 readers. And but that to me is just the excitement of it.
yeah, I wish I had the time to learn how to do the audio stuff on my own, so I leave it to the
Mhm.
professionals to do. And but ultimately, it would be something that would be really cool to be involved in. I would love to get into these like larger, sort of more epic reads where it's more than one
Mhm.
person,
Oh
and you've
yeah.
got 5 or 6 actors and actresses that are playing different parts, right? And I think that would be a lot of fun to do too. But for now, slow and steady, and figuring out as I go. And so a guy like Victor, or like Larch, when she does my
Mhm.
illustration, I'll try to bring in professionals to make it look better than I was ever going to make it. And so that's
Right.
that's what they're there for. So
Well, I think you've done an awesome job, and I'm sure the Audible books are gonna be fantastic. I can't wait to get into them. I wanna thank you so much for being a part of the podcast this evening.
my pleasure. Thanks, and having me back anytime. I'd be more than happy to do it.
Well, great, I would love that. You're more than welcome to hit me up anytime and say, "Hey, yo, we got some time on that calendar."
Sounds like a plan. I won't be
Uh,
shy.
alright, wonderful. I wanna thank our listeners, guys, for the last 4 years. You've really made my day. Every time I see there's more downloads, I'm so excited to come back on and share another guest with you. So, thank you again JV, and thank you to our listeners. Until next time, guys. Bye bye for now.